The chill of dawn hung heavy over the Normandy countryside. Mist clung to the fields like a ghostly shroud, hiding secrets and death alike. The calm was deceptive, a quiet before the storm that would forever mark the pages of history. On the horizon, the silhouette of steel giants began to emerge, the Cromwell tanks of the British 7th Armoured Division. Sleek, fast, and deadly, they rumbled through the muddy fields, their engines growling like predators sensing prey. Each tank was a world of its own. Inside, the crew prepared silently, each man lost in thought, each man aware of the peril awaiting them. The commander adjusted his maps, tracing routes through the hedgerows, memorizing every fold in the land, knowing that one misstep could be fatal. The gunner ran his hands over the polished cannon, feeling its weight, imagining the shell as it screamed through enemy lines. The driver tightened his grip on the controls, anticipating the challenge of maneuvering through obstacles, craters, and chaos. Outside, the British infantry moved in careful formation, flanking the armored beasts. They knew these tanks were not just weapons, they were symbols of power, of hope, of vengeance for years of bloodshed. And yet, they were vulnerable, bound by the same earth that they sought to dominate. Facing an enemy who had fortified every inch of the landscape with deadly cunning, the Cromwell tanks were not the heaviest, nor the most armored, but speed was their advantage. And with speed came surprise. They could strike fast, retreat, and strike again before the enemy had time to regroup. In the quiet moments before the offensive, their engines whispered promises of destruction. Each rev, each shift of the gear, was a countdown to chaos, a heartbeat in a machine designed for war. As the first rays of sun pierced the morning mist, the tension became palpable. Radios crackled with final orders, voices tight with anticipation. This was not a drill. This was the edge of history, a point in time where courage and steel would collide. Soldiers exchanged glances, brief nods, acknowledging fear and determination alike. Behind them, the earth seemed to hold its breath. The first tanks rolled forward, their tracks cutting deep furrows into the wet soil. Mud splattered, smoke drifted lazily, and the sound of metal on earth became a rhythm, ominous, unrelenting, and hypnotic. The Cromwell's guns were ready, loaded with shells that could tear through the heaviest German armor. But it wasn't just firepower that mattered. Coordination, precision, and nerves of steel would decide who survived and who became a footnote in history. As they approached the outskirts of Caen, the air thickened with anticipation. Trees shivered in the breeze, hiding enemy observers who would soon reveal themselves. Every hedge, every ditch could conceal a threat in ambush, a panzer, a mine. The crews were acutely aware that their strength was only as good as their awareness, and in these moments, their minds were sharper than any weapon. The first shots rang out, breaking the dawn's fragile serenity. Explosions tore the fields apart, sending dirt and fragments into the air. The Cromwells responded with precision, targeting fortified positions, clearing paths for the infantry. Smoke and fire merged with the morning mist, creating a surreal battlefield where steel and courage danced together in deadly harmony. Every maneuver, every turn of the turret, was a life-or-death decision. For the infantry moving alongside, the tanks were both shield and spear. They advanced under the shadow of these metal titans, taking cover behind their hulls, relying on their speed and agility to push forward through the chaos. Communication was critical. Gestures, signals, shouts above the roar of engines and gunfire. One mistake could be fatal. One hesitation could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Hours passed in this relentless rhythm. The tanks pushed deeper, breaking through enemy lines, crushing obstacles, and silencing threats. Yet, the cost was evident. Shell holes scarred the land, overturned vehicles littered the path, and the cries of the wounded echoed amidst the relentless mechanical growl. Every advance demanded strategy, courage, and unyielding determination. The German defenders fought back fiercely. Anti-tank guns flashed, artillery rumbled, and ambushes sprung from hidden positions. But the Cromwell tanks, with their speed and tactical coordination, adapted, shifted formations, and continued their relentless advance. Each victory was temporary, each gain hard-won. But momentum began to favor the British forces. The battlefield became a living entity, a chaotic symphony of fire, steel, and human will. By midday, the pace did not relent. Crews worked tirelessly, rotating gunners, loaders, and drivers with military precision. The tanks that once rumbled through fields now fought through rubble-strewn streets, where the noise of battle echoed between ruined buildings. Every corner could hide danger. Every rooftop could conceal death. Yet, these steel beasts pressed onward, a testament to engineering, courage, and sheer resolve. As the sun began its descent, the silhouettes of Caen's defenses emerged. The city itself, scarred and fortified, stood as the ultimate challenge. But the British tanks had learned the landscape, understood the rhythm of battle, and embraced their purpose. With every shell fired, every maneuver executed, they carved a path not just through enemy lines, but into history itself. By evening, the battle had transformed from preparation to execution, from strategy to sheer determination. The Cromwells, tired but unbroken, stood as monuments of resolve. Crews emerged, battered but alive, each man bearing the marks of battle mud-streaked faces, scorched uniforms, and eyes that reflected the horrors and heroism they had endured. The night brought a different kind of tension. Silent patrols moved cautiously. The city's ruins hiding threats that could strike without warning. Engines idled, smoke curled lazily into the sky, and soldiers whispered, not out of fear, but in awe of the machines that had carried them through the fire. Tomorrow promised more fighting, more chaos, but in these moments, a victory small but vital was celebrated silently among men and machines alike. Through the night, the story of the Cromwell tanks in the Battle of Caen unfolded, not just in the movement of steel, but in the courage of those who manned them. The echoes of engines, the flashes of gunfire, and the unwavering determination of the crews became a testament to human resilience, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of victory. In the end, the British 7th Armoured Division's Cromwell tanks were more than machines. They were the pulse of the battlefield, the embodiment of speed, courage, and power. They carried men into history, etched their presence onto the earth, and changed the tide of battle in ways that would be remembered for generations. And as dawn broke on the next day, those who survived understood that they had witnessed the raw, unyielding force of steel unleashed, the heart of war beating through the machines that defined an era. Night had fallen, but the battlefield was far from silent. Fires burned in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the shattered landscape. The once gentle Normandy fields had become a maze of craters, debris, and twisted metal. The Cromwell tanks moved cautiously, their engines now low growls, as if aware that the darkness held unseen threats. Every shadow could conceal a lurking enemy tank. Every flicker of movement could be an ambush waiting to strike. Inside the lead tank, the commander scanned the terrain through the periscope, eyes straining to pierce the night. His crew followed every command with precision. They knew that the night could either be their salvation or their undoing. The infantry moved in tandem, hugging the shadows, trusting the tanks to shield them while they scouted for hidden dangers. This was war in its rawest form, every step measured, every breath loaded with anticipation. Suddenly, a distant flash lit up the horizon, the telltale sign of enemy artillery. Shells screamed overhead, slamming into the earth with bone-shaking force. The tanks jolted, but their armor held. The crews braced for impact, adrenaline pumping through their veins, every man aware that survival required both courage and sharp instincts. The infantry ducked behind wreckage, while the tanks responded with calculated fury, returning fire to neutralize the threat. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by sporadic gunfire and the distant rumble of explosions. Crews rotated inside the tanks, exhaustion setting in, yet no one allowed themselves the luxury of fatigue. Every tank was a lifeline, every soldier a guardian. Outside, the moon cast ghostly shadows across the ruined landscape, transforming craters into traps, walls into hiding places for the enemy. As dawn approached, the first light revealed the city of Caen in all its devastation. Buildings were reduced to skeletons, streets turned to rubble. The Cromwell tanks advanced through this urban battlefield, maneuvering with precision that belied the chaos surrounding them. Their speed and agility allowed them to dodge traps, flank enemy positions, and clear pathways for the infantry. Every corner turned, every street crossed, was a calculated risk, a dance with death that demanded unwavering focus. The human cost was palpable. Soldiers emerged from the rubble, some injured, some exhausted, but all carrying the scars of battle. Crews inside the tanks were bruised, soaked in sweat and mud, yet their resolve was unbroken. Each shell fired, each maneuver executed, was a testament to their training, courage, and determination. These were men and machines united by a singular purpose: to break through the enemy lines and change the course of the battle. By midday, the rhythm of the offensive intensified. German defenders launched counterattacks, desperate to reclaim lost ground. Anti-tank guns roared, grenades exploded, and small arms fire rattled across the ruined streets. Yet, the Cromwells pressed on. Their speed allowed them to outmaneuver traps. Their firepower shattered enemy defenses, and their presence inspired the infantry to push forward, undeterred by the chaos around them. Inside one tank, a loader paused briefly, wiping blood from a minor wound. Glancing at his fellow crew members, in their eyes, he saw the same mixture of fear and determination that coursed through his own veins. They were all aware that one wrong decision could cost their lives, yet they moved as one unit, synchronized in a deadly ballet of war. The battlefield demanded perfection, and they gave it, moment by moment, shell by shell. As evening descended, the city's defenders were in disarray. Streets once fortified with deadly traps and heavy firepower now lay open to the advancing British forces. The tanks moved with purpose, their engines humming a relentless rhythm that echoed through the ruins. The infantry followed, seizing every building, every street corner, every inch of ground that had been defended so fiercely just hours before. But even in victory, the battle was far from over. Supplies were low, the men were exhausted, and the threat of ambush was constant. The Cromwell tanks, though powerful, were not invincible. Every movement required strategy, Every decision could tip the balance between survival and disaster. Crews stayed alert, communicating silently, eyes scanning every rooftop, every alleyway, every shadow that could conceal danger. Night returned, colder this time, carrying with it the heavy scent of smoke, blood, and earth. Fires illuminated the battlefield in a flickering, haunting glow. Soldiers moved cautiously, tanks patrolled methodically, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter of destruction and courage to unfold. The men and their machines had survived the first wave, but the cost was etched into the soil and into their very beings. In these quiet moments, reflection set in. The crews thought of home, of loved ones left behind, of the lives that had been lost and the battles yet to come. Yet, despite the fear and the devastation, there was pride. Pride in their machines, pride in their training, pride in the unity that allowed them to face such overwhelming odds. They were more than soldiers, they were the living embodiment of resilience, determination, and the unyielding will to prevail. And as the first light of a new dawn broke over the horizon, the Cromwell tanks stood ready once more. They had proven their power, their speed, their effectiveness in the chaos of battle. But more than that, they had carried their crews through fire and smoke, through fear and uncertainty, and into history itself. Every engine roar, every shell fired, every life saved or lost had written a chapter in the story of the Battle of Caen, story of courage, of steel, and of human endurance under the harshest of circumstances. Dawn broke over Caen once more, revealing the full scale of the battlefield. The city was a shattered labyrinth of rubble-strewn streets, bombed-out buildings, and twisted metal. Smoke still curled from fires that had raged through the night, and the smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. Every step forward was a test of courage. Every corner could hide death. The Cromwell tanks moved like predators, engines growling, treads tearing into the ruined streets. Their speed was unmatched, allowing them to outflank German defenses and strike with deadly precision. Shells fired from their cannons tore through barricades and fortified positions, sending plumes of debris into the sky. Infantry followed closely, inspired and shielded by the tank's imposing presence. Inside one tank, the commander scanned the ruins through his periscope. He saw the enemy regrouping, desperate to hold their ground, but their morale was faltering. The tanks pressed on, moving from street to street, combining firepower and strategy with lethal efficiency. Every maneuver, every shot, was a calculated decision. Mistakes were fatal, and yet the crews executed each action with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Suddenly, from the rubble of a half-collapsed building, enemy artillery opened fire. Shells exploded nearby, throwing earth and debris in all directions. The Cromwells responded instantly, rotating turrets, firing precise rounds, and crushing the threat before it could do serious damage. The infantry surged forward, taking advantage of the tank's suppression to clear snipers, machine gun nests, and hidden ambushes. Hours passed in relentless combat. The city was alive with chaos, fire, and smoke, yet the British forces advanced steadily. Crews inside the tanks were exhausted, faces streaked with mud and sweat, yet they did not falter. Each man had learned the rhythm of battle to quiet tension. The sudden bursts of violence, the delicate balance between strategy and instinct. They were not just operating machines. They were extensions of them, moving as one unit, unstoppable in their coordination. By midday, the German defenders were pushed to their limits. Their positions were crumbling, ammunition running low, and the chaos around them was suffocating. The Cromwell tanks pressed the advantage, using speed to strike weak points, exploiting gaps, and forcing the enemy to retreat or surrender. Streets that had been heavily fortified were now under British control, the tanks blazing a path through the ruins, clearing the way for infantry to consolidate the gains. Inside the tanks, moments of humanity punctuated the chaos. A loader shared a word of encouragement with a comrade. A gunner smiled grimly after a successful strike, and the commander allowed himself a brief nod of pride at the precision of his crew. These moments were fleeting but vital. They reminded each man that despite the destruction around them, they were alive, fighting not just for victory, but for each other. As the sun began to set, the final push into Caen commenced. The remaining German forces made a desperate stand in the city center, barricading streets, setting traps, and opening fire from every available position. The Cromwell tanks advanced with determination, their engines roaring like thunder, their cannons tearing through obstacles. Every move was tense, every shot could mean survival or death, and every second counted. The climax of the battle unfolded in a chaotic, almost cinematic sequence. Tanks maneuvered through narrow streets, shells fired from both sides, buildings crumbling around them. Infantry fought alongside their steel allies, clearing rooms, alleys, and fortified positions with unmatched courage. Smoke, fire, and dust blended into a surreal haze, masking the danger yet heightening the intensity. The tanks, agile and relentless, became the heartbeat of the assault, dictating the pace and shaping the battlefield. Slowly, inch by inch, the city fell under British control. The remaining German defenders were either captured or forced to flee. Exhausted soldiers emerged from the rubble, breathing heavily, faces streaked with soot and sweat. Crews climbed out of their tanks, battered but victorious, their machines scarred but still standing. In that moment, the power of the Cromwell tanks, combined with human courage and coordination, was undeniable. They had transformed the tide of battle. As night fell over Caen, silence returned, though it was the eerie calm after a storm. Fires burned in isolated pockets, casting flickering shadows over ruined streets. Soldiers tended to the wounded, checked their equipment, and allowed themselves a brief moment of reflection. The city had been taken, but at great cost. Yet, in the minds of those who had fought, a profound sense of achievement burned brighter than any fear or exhaustion. The story of the Cromwell tanks at the Battle of Caen was more than a tale of firepower and strategy. It was a testament to human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. These machines had carried men through the worst chaos, had turned the tide of battle, and had etched their place into history. For the crews who had lived through it, the tanks were more than steel, they were companions, shields, and instruments of destiny. In the quiet aftermath, as the night sky stretched over the city, the roar of vengeance faded, leaving only the echoes of battle in memory. The men in their tanks had endured, had prevailed, and had carved a path that would be remembered for generations. They had witnessed the raw power of steel, speed, and courage, and in doing so, had shown the world that even in the darkest hours, determination and unity could shape the course of history. The Cromwell tanks stood silently in the ruins, engines cooled, weapons poised but at rest. They had done their duty. The men who had survived the battle would carry the memory forever, the roar of engines, the fire of cannons, the chaos of battle, and the unbreakable bond between soldier and machine. Together, they had forged a legacy, a story of valor, endurance, and the relentless march of history. And so, the Battle of Caen became more than a battle, it became a testament. A testament to courage, to strategy, to human endurance, and to the steel giants who carried men through fire and chaos. The story of the Cromwell tanks would echo through time, reminding all who heard it that history is written not just by strategy, but by those brave enough to face it head-on, with engines roaring and hearts unyielding. The night deepened over Caen, and with it came a strange, solemn quiet. The battlefield was littered with the remnants of war-burned-out vehicles, shattered buildings, and the scars of fire and steel etched into the earth. Yet amidst the destruction, there was a sense of triumph, hard-won and undeniable. The Cromwell tanks, battered but unbroken, stood like silent sentinels over the city, their engines cooled, their cannons still capable, their crews exhausted but alive. The men who had survived climbed from the hulls, mud-streaked, soot-covered, and weary. They looked at the tanks not just as machines, but as partners, comrades who had carried them through the most hellish of trials. In those moments, silence spoke louder than any cheer. The victory had been costly, but it had been theirs earned with sweat, courage, and unyielding determination. As they surveyed the ruins of Caen, a profound understanding settled over them. War was chaos, but through that chaos, human ingenuity, courage, and perseverance could prevail. The Cromwell tanks had embodied that truth. They had not only broken the enemy's defenses, they had carried the hopes of men into history. Every engine roar, every shell fired, every life preserved or lost had become part of the story of this battle. And yet, the story did not end with victory. The men knew the war continued, that battles lay ahead, that more chaos, more fire, more sacrifice awaited. But in this moment, they allowed themselves to honor what they had accomplished. They had faced overwhelming odds, stared death in the face, and emerged victorious. They had seen firsthand the power of steel, speed, and human resolve combined. The first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the ruined city in a muted gold. In that light, the Cromwell tanks gleamed faintly, steel bodies reflecting the sunrise like beacons of resilience. The battlefield was quiet now, but the story of what had transpired here at the courage, the determination, the relentless march of men and machines through firewood echo far beyond these streets. Soldiers gathered in small groups, sharing quiet words, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next phase of their campaign. Yet in the hearts of all who had survived, a memory had been forged, a memory of engines roaring through smoke, of cannons firing with precision, of men standing together against impossible odds. This memory would become legend, a testament to courage, endurance, and the unstoppable force of the British 7th Armoured Division. And as the morning fully broke, the final image of the Cromwell tanks rolling steadily forward became an enduring symbol, steel and human will united, a force that could carve through chaos and leave its mark on history. The Battle of Caen was over for now, but the story of bravery, strategy, and relentless determination would be remembered forever. In the end, the Cromwell tanks were more than machines. They were partners in courage, instruments of strategy, and symbols of human resilience. They carried men into battle, through fire and smoke, and into history itself. And for those who survived, who witnessed their power firsthand, the memory of that Datha engines, the cannon fire, the courage would never fade. It would remain, etched into memory like steel into the battlefield. A story of courage, unity, and the unyielding heart of war. And so, The roar of the Cromwells faded into memory, but their legacy remained a reminder that in the darkest hours, when courage meets steel, history itself can be reshaped.